Picture this. It's 1987. A low-budget movie with a scandalous title, a cast nobody was fully rooting for, and a script that had been rejected more times than most people apply for jobs, walks into theaters and blows the roof off the entire entertainment industry. That movie, of course, is Dirty Dancing. Now, nearly 4 decades later, people are still talking about it, still rewatching it, and still getting chills during that final dance scene. But here's the thing, what most viewers see on screen is just the polished surface of something that was far messier, far more painful, and far more fascinating behind the camera. And today, we are going to dig deep into all of it. We're talking about scenes you've watched 100 times that were never actually planned. We're talking about real arguments, real injuries, real tears, and real cold water that nearly froze the cast solid. We're talking about how the whole movie nearly didn't happen at all, and the wild reasons why. So if you think you know everything there is to know about Dirty Dancing, buckle up, because this is going to change how you watch it forever. Let's get into it. Let's start at the very beginning, because even before a single frame was shot, Dirty Dancing was already causing trouble, and it started with the name itself. Today, the title feels perfectly suited to the film. It's bold, it's a little cheeky, and it tells you exactly what you're in for. But back in the mid-1980s, that title raised some serious eyebrows, and not just from uptight neighbors at the dinner table. We're talking about actual authorities holding up official film materials at the border because they genuinely thought they were dealing with adult content. The screenwriter, Eleanor Bergstein, based the story on real events from her own life. She wanted the title to reflect the kind of dancing she grew up doing, grinding, close contact, sensual movement that parents hated and teenagers absolutely loved. To her, the title was personal. It was honest. But to the outside world, hearing Dirty Dancing, without any context in 1986 made a lot of people assume the worst. Customs officials at the Canadian border reportedly held up the film's daily footage, the raw footage sent back from set each day, because they were convinced the production was some kind of adult film. Imagine being on that film crew, anxiously waiting for your footage to clear, only to find out it was stuck at the border because someone read the title and jumped to conclusions. And if you think that was the only problem with the name, wait until you hear what Patrick Swayze thought about it. The man who became the face of the film, the actor whose name became permanently linked to that title, absolutely hated it. He made no secret of this either. In a 1987 interview, Patrick sat down with reporter Bobby Wygant and said plainly that he despised the title and wished they had gone with something else. He felt it cheapened the story and the performances, and he pushed hard to get it changed before the film hit theaters. Of course, the studio held firm. They believed in the title, and they weren't budging. Now here's the part that makes Patrick's objections a little easier to understand, and also a little harder to take seriously at the same time. The alternative title that was floating around? Are you ready for this? The film was nearly called I Was a Teenage Mambo Queen. Yes. That was a real option that real adults with real jobs sat around a table and seriously considered. So while Patrick's frustration with Dirty Dancing is understandable, the alternative doesn't exactly scream cinematic classic either. In the end, the studio made the right call, even if it came with a small border incident and a very unhappy lead actor. Sometimes, the right decision is the messy one. Now let's talk about casting, because this is where things get truly mind-bending. We all know Patrick Swayze as Johnny Castle. The brooding, passionate, jaw-droppingly talented dance instructor who sweeps baby off her feet and into cinematic history. It's impossible to picture anyone else in that role. But several very well-known actors came remarkably close to getting it. Before Patrick was ever seriously considered, names like Billy Zane, Benicio del Toro, and Val Kilmer were all being evaluated for the part. These are not obscure names, these are actors who went on to have massive careers. And any one of them stepping into those dancing shoes would have produced a completely different film. Billy Zane actually made it the furthest. By the time filming was beginning, Zane had essentially been confirmed for the role. He wasn't just a possibility, he was the guy. That is, until producers and the director started watching him work with Jennifer Grey, and something felt off. The spark wasn't there. The electricity that the story depended on simply wasn't showing up between them on camera, and the creative team knew it. The director had a strong philosophy about casting. He wanted real dancers who could act, not actors who could sort of fake dancing with the help of stunt doubles and camera tricks. He felt that audiences would feel the difference, even if they couldn't explain why. That conviction is ultimately what led the team back to Patrick, who had trained at prestigious institutions including the Harkis and Joffrey ballet schools. Patrick wasn't just acting like a dancer. He was one. On the other side of that partnership, Jennifer Grey's path to the role of Baby was just as uncertain. Sarah Jessica Parker and Winona Ryder both auditioned for the part. Think about that for a second. Two women who would go on to become absolute icons of their generations were considered to play Baby Houseman. Either of them might have delivered something wonderful, but they weren't Jennifer Grey, and this story needed Jennifer Grey. When Jennifer was cast, she came with something that most people don't know about: genuine fear. Not stage fright, real, deep anxiety about partnering with Patrick specifically. They had already worked together on the 1984 film Red Dawn, and their working relationship had not exactly been smooth. Jennifer knew Patrick was an exceptional dancer. She also knew she wasn't. And that gap terrified her. She later opened up about the dynamic in an interview, describing it as a collision of opposites. Patrick, she said, would throw himself into anything without hesitation. She, on the other hand, was scared to do almost everything. His fearlessness and her fearfulness created a tension that, as it turned out, was exactly what the movie needed. But living inside that tension every day on set was a very different experience than what audiences see in the final film. Jennifer was paid $50,000 for the role, a number that feels almost absurdly modest given what the film ended up generating. The movie grossed over $214 million at the box office. For a film made on a budget of just $6 million, that is a return that defies imagination. But nobody knew that was coming. At the time, $50,000 felt like a reasonable offer for a small film nobody expected much from. Alright, this is the part of the video that a lot of you have been waiting for, because we're getting into the scenes themselves, specifically, the ones that weren't supposed to happen at all. One of the most joyful, most rewatched moments in the entire film is the rehearsal montage where Johnny is trying to teach Baby the mambo. He trails his fingers along her arm to guide her movement, and Baby just completely falls apart laughing. She can't stop. She tries, she genuinely tries, but the giggles keep coming back. And Johnny, Patrick, looks increasingly frustrated, almost exasperated, as she continues to crack up. It is absolutely charming. Audiences love it because it feels completely real, like you're peeking behind a curtain and seeing two people genuinely connect rather than perform. And here's the thing, you are. Because none of that was in the script. Not a single second of it. Jennifer was actually, genuinely ticklish. Patrick trailing his fingers along her arm wasn't a choreographed gesture, it was him trying to physically guide her through a movement, and her body just responded the way a ticklish person's body responds. She started laughing and couldn't stop. And Patrick's irritation? Also real. He wasn't acting. He was a trained, disciplined dancer trying to teach choreography on a very tight production schedule, and his scene partner kept dissolving into giggles every time he touched her arm. The frustration you see on his face is genuine. Here's the part that makes the story even better though. When they eventually finished shooting the scene the proper way, with Jennifer keeping it together, the crew moved on. They forgot about the footage where she laughed. Completely forgot it existed. It wasn't until the film's editor was going through all the raw material in the editing room that anyone rediscovered it. The editor found the footage, watched it, and apparently could not stop laughing. The producer, Linda Gottlieb, has shared this story publicly, how she and the rest of the team burst out laughing when they saw it for the first time in the editing room. Then they showed it to Jennifer and Patrick, who had also completely forgotten the moment had been captured. And they laughed too. Not just because it was cute, but because they'd genuinely forgotten it had happened. After all that laughter, the decision was easy. That footage went into the film, and it became one of the most beloved moments in a movie full of beloved moments. It is a perfect example of something that no amount of scripting or rehearsing could manufacture: authentic human chemistry caught on camera by accident. The accidental laughter scene isn't the only unscripted moment that made it into the final cut. There's another one that's slightly less famous but equally wonderful when you know the backstory behind it. You know the scene where Johnny and Baby dance together to Mickey and Sylvia's "Love is Strange"? It's loose and playful and intimate, with none of the polish of the film's bigger set pieces. It feels like a private moment between two people who are starting to trust each other, and that warmth jumps off the screen. What you're actually watching is a rehearsal. The cameras were rolling while Patrick and Jennifer were running through material ahead of a different scene they were supposed to shoot that day. Nobody told them to do anything in particular. They were just moving together, getting comfortable, being themselves, and the cameras were quietly capturing everything. When the footage was reviewed, the decision to include it was obvious. You simply cannot fake what's in that scene. The ease between them, the way they move like they've been dancing together for years, it's real because it was real. It was two people becoming genuine partners in a moment they thought was private. This is one of those rare instances where a film is actually improved by the things that went unplanned. The director and producers could have stuck rigidly to the script and delivered a perfectly competent film. Instead, they were wise enough to recognize that the best material was sometimes coming from the moments between the takes, and they had the courage to use it. Now we need to talk about something that most viewers never suspect while watching Dirty Dancing, because the performances are so fluid and seemingly effortless. Almost every single physically demanding scene in this film cost Patrick Swayze real, significant pain. Patrick's left knee was in terrible shape long before he ever set foot on that set. The problems traced back to his teenage years, when he was a promising high school football player. A serious injury during those years caused lasting damage to his knee joint. After the injury, he turned to dance and gymnastics as a form of rehabilitation, a way to rebuild strength without the bruising contact of football. It worked well enough that he became a genuinely exceptional dancer, eventually performing as a principal dancer with the Elliott Feld Ballet Company. But the original damage never fully healed. And then, when he was just 24 years old, a tooth abscess led to a severe staph infection that spread into his bloodstream and settled directly in that already compromised leg. The infection was life-threatening. Doctors warned Patrick that without aggressive treatment, amputation was a genuine possibility. He survived it, obviously, but the leg was never the same. By the time he was filming Dirty Dancing, more than a decade after the infection, the pain in his knee was a constant companion. Most of the cartilage was gone, leaving bone grinding painfully against bone with every movement. And this is the man performing complex lifts and intricate choreography for 43 days straight on a tight production schedule. The log balancing scene was particularly brutal. Patrick fell off repeatedly, and each fall sent shockwaves through that already damaged knee. The swelling became so severe that medical staff had to drain fluid from the joint just to allow him to keep working. His resume had actually included a note saying, "No dancing," to protect his knee, and he ended up starring in one of the most dance-intensive films of the decade. As for the iconic lake lift, the one where Johnny raises Baby above his head in the water while triumphant music plays, Patrick has spoken about just how deceptively difficult that was. Lifting someone in water is nothing like lifting them on dry land. The water resistance, the shifting balance, the instability of the footing, it all multiplies the physical demand enormously. He described the experience of lifting Jennifer in that lake as feeling like she weighed 500 pounds, despite her being slight in build. And his knee was screaming the entire time. None of this is visible in the finished film. His dedication to the craft was so complete, his professionalism so ironclad, that viewers have spent nearly 4 decades watching those scenes and seeing only grace and strength. The pain was real. The effort was real. And the fact that he hid it so thoroughly is itself a testament to how remarkable a performer Patrick Swayze truly was. The physical suffering on set wasn't limited to Patrick's knee. The entire cast and crew were dealing with extreme conditions that created a genuinely dangerous environment during parts of the production. Filming began in early September 1986 and ran for 43 days, wrapping in late October. The challenge was that the story was set during a warm summer vacation, but as production stretched into autumn, the weather outside was anything but summery. The crew had to get creative, and sometimes that creativity still couldn't fully solve the problem. On the warmer end of things, during indoor shooting days, the heat from the camera equipment and lighting rigs pushed temperatures inside the filming spaces to almost unimaginable levels. The thermometers reportedly hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit inside some of the shooting locations. That is not a comfortable environment for anyone, it's genuinely dangerous. On one particularly severe day, 10 members of the cast and crew fainted within a span of just 25 minutes. 10 people. That's not a rough day on set, that's a health emergency. Veteran actress Paula Truman, who played a recurring character in the film, collapsed from dehydration and had to be rushed to the emergency room. When the people working on your film are landing in the hospital, you know the conditions have crossed a line. But the heat was only part of the problem. As filming continued into October, the outdoor scenes, particularly anything involving the lake, became a completely different kind of ordeal. The water temperature had dropped to around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That is barely above freezing. And the scene that required Jennifer to be in that water, looking joyful and carefree, had to be filmed multiple times. Jennifer has spoken about this experience with remarkable candor. She has described the water as horrifically cold, saying the only reason she could push through it was because she was young and driven and willing to endure discomfort in pursuit of something she believed in. When you watch that scene now, knowing she was submerged in 40-degree water, her performance becomes even more impressive. That smile on her face was hard-won. Patrick's descriptions of the lake were equally vivid. He called it hypothermically cold, which is not hyperbole. That water temperature is well within the range where the human body starts to struggle to maintain core temperature. And they filmed the scene not once, but repeatedly, until every angle was captured correctly. To maintain the illusion of summer for the outdoor scenes, the production crew spray-painted grass and leaves green to compensate for the autumn color changes. It's one of those details that sounds almost comedic when you describe it, but it was a genuine and necessary solution to a logistical problem. The film needed to look like July. Reality was offering October. So they painted the trees. Let's talk about Jennifer Grey, because her story after Dirty Dancing is one of the more poignant in Hollywood history, and it's a story that deserves more attention than it usually gets. The year 1987 should have been the beginning of a golden era for Jennifer. She had already made a memorable impression in Ferris Bueller's Day Off the previous year, and now Dirty Dancing was turning her into a genuine star. She was young, talented, recognizable, and on the verge of the kind of career that most actors only dream about. But just before the film's premiere, Jennifer was involved in a serious car accident in Ireland that claimed 2 lives. Her then-boyfriend Matthew Broderick was severely injured. The accident cast a deep shadow over what was supposed to be her triumphant moment, and the emotional weight of that experience followed her for years. Then, in the early 1990s, Jennifer made a decision that she would later describe as one of the most life-altering mistakes of her life. She underwent rhinoplasty, a nose job. She has been open about the fact that Hollywood's pressures played a role in the decision, the feeling that her distinctly unconventional features might be holding her back from certain roles. She wanted to look more like the conventional idea of a Hollywood leading lady. The surgery did not go as hoped. Complications required a second corrective procedure, and the results left Jennifer looking so different that people who had known her for years genuinely failed to recognize her on the street. The features that had made her face so expressive and so distinctly her own, the same features that audiences had fallen in love with in Dirty Dancing, were gone. Jennifer has spoken about this with extraordinary honesty in her memoir, which she titled Out of the Corner. She described the experience as being like a disfiguring accident that made her more conventionally pretty while simultaneously destroying the thing that had made her distinctive. She said it shattered something fundamental about who she was, at least in terms of how the world perceived her. The momentum she had built, the recognition, the connection audiences had with her face, evaporated almost overnight. For a period, she contemplated changing her name entirely and starting her career over from scratch with a new identity. She ultimately decided against that, choosing instead to confront the aftermath directly. But the damage to her career trajectory was real and lasting. Hollywood, which had just been opening its doors to her, began to see her differently, or rather, didn't see her at all. It's a complicated story about beauty standards, industry pressure, and the cost of trying to conform to someone else's idea of what a star should look like. And it stands as a painful reminder that what makes a performer truly special is often precisely what makes them look different from everyone else. Here is perhaps the most astonishing part of the entire Dirty Dancing story. The film very nearly was never made at all, and even after it was made, very nearly never reached audiences. Eleanor Bergstein's screenplay was rejected 43 times before anyone agreed to produce it. 43. Most writers give up long before that number. The people who kept passing on the project weren't wrong to be skeptical. On paper, a small romantic drama about dancing at a summer resort didn't have the kind of high-concept hook that studios typically looked for. It was quiet, character-driven, and rooted in a very specific time and place. Eventually, a small studio called Vestron agreed to take it on. Vestron wasn't a major Hollywood player. They had built their business primarily in home video distribution. They were willing to take a chance on Dirty Dancing partly because their expectations weren't particularly high. They didn't need it to be a blockbuster. They just needed it to be good enough for home video. Filming wrapped on time and on budget, which is not always a given in film production. But the early response to the rough cut was grim. Test screenings were underwhelming. Executives at Vestron were worried. A troubling number of test viewers, nearly 40%, didn't even register that the film contained a subplot involving an illegal abortion, which was one of the story's most significant dramatic elements. The most cutting assessment came from producer Aaron Russo, who watched an early cut in May 1987 and reportedly suggested that the best course of action would be to destroy the film entirely and claim the insurance money. That is about as negative a review as a film can receive from someone whose job it is to help get it released. Marketing the film was its own nightmare. A promotional partnership with the skincare brand Clearasil fell apart when the company learned about the abortion storyline and demanded it be removed from the film. When the filmmakers refused, correctly, Clearasil walked away, leaving the studio to handle promotion largely on its own with limited resources. The original plan was to release Dirty Dancing for a single weekend in theaters and then move it quickly to home video, which was Vestron's real area of expertise. The theatrical release was almost an afterthought. What happened instead was something nobody predicted. Audiences went absolutely wild for it. Word of mouth spread fast, and the film's theatrical run extended well beyond anyone's expectations. By the time it was done, Dirty Dancing had grossed over $214 million worldwide. It won an Academy Award for Best Original Song for I've Had the Time of My Life. It launched Patrick Swayze into superstardom and cemented Jennifer Grey's place in pop culture history. A film that a producer suggested burning. A screenplay rejected 43 times. A production that nearly fell apart before it began. Turned into one of the most beloved movies in cinema history. Given everything the original film accomplished, it's not surprising that sequel conversations have happened at various points over the decades. What is surprising is the road those conversations have taken to get to where we are now. In 2020, it was confirmed that Jennifer Grey would executive produce and star in a new Dirty Dancing film. Jennifer herself confirmed that she would return as Baby, and described being genuinely excited about exploring what the character's life looks like 30 years on, set in the 1990s, a completely different cultural moment than the summer of 1963 where the original was set. The production faced delays related to industry strikes, pushing the release back from an originally planned 2024 slot to a 2025 target. But the project has moved forward, and the basic premise, Baby returning to the Kellerman's resort for another summer, her journey intertwining with that of a new young couple, has taken shape. The impossible question, of course, is what to do about Johnny Castle. Patrick Swayze passed away in 2009 after a battle with pancreatic cancer. His presence in the original film is so central that any sequel has to reckon with his absence directly. The approach being taken is to acknowledge Johnny's passing within the story itself, to honor his character rather than recast the role. Lionsgate reportedly negotiated with Patrick's estate to ensure his legacy is handled with care. It's worth noting that Patrick himself, when approached about sequel ideas during his lifetime, declined to participate. He believed the original film ended exactly the way it should, and that returning to it would diminish rather than enhance it. His widow, Lisa Swayze, has expressed that perspective publicly since his passing. Public reaction to the sequel news has been genuinely divided. A significant portion of the fan base shares Patrick's view: the ending is perfect, the story is complete, and revisiting it risks tarnishing something precious. Another portion is deeply excited to see Jennifer return to the role and curious about where Baby's story goes from that final dance. Both reactions make complete sense. The only honest thing to say at this point is that we'll have to wait and see. The original Dirty Dancing was dismissed, doubted, and nearly destroyed before it proved everyone wrong. If anyone has earned the benefit of the doubt, it's this franchise. So there you have it. 37 years of secrets, accidents, injuries, and incredible stories hiding inside a film that most people think they already know inside and out. A title that was nearly banned at the border. Casting choices that came down to the wire. Two lead actors who clashed constantly behind the scenes but ignited something extraordinary every time the cameras rolled. Scenes that nobody planned, nobody remembered filming, and that became the moments audiences remember most. A lake so cold it should have shut down production. A knee injury that should have kept Patrick Swayze off the dance floor entirely. A film that was nearly burned, literally suggested to be destroyed, and instead became a cultural touchstone that 4 decades later still has people rewatching it and feeling things they can't quite explain. Dirty Dancing isn't just a good movie. It's a testament to what happens when talented people refuse to give up on something real, even when everything seems to be working against them. Every giggle, every fall, every spray-painted leaf, every shiver in that freezing lake, it all ended up on screen in one form or another. And somehow, improbably, beautifully, it all worked. Which of these behind-the-scenes stories surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, we genuinely want to know. And if you caught something we missed, tell us that too. We read everything. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and click on the video on your screen for more stories like this one. We'll see you in the next one.